Good morning. The SAWS board meeting of February 1st, 2022 is called to order. The San Antonio Water System Board of Trustees will, during the meeting, close the meeting and hold an executive session pursuant to and in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Open Meetings Act. The Board of Trustees may at any time during the meeting close the meeting and hold an executive session for consultation with its attorneys concerning any of the matters to be considered during the meeting pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Open Meetings Act. So we'll move now to the individual items and item number 18.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, Mayor, Trustees. My name is Tracy Lehman. I'm here to present the utility service agreements for the second month of the year. This month, for your consideration, we have 3 utility service agreements, one on the southeast side as a multifamily, and 2 on the northeast side, which you have previously seen as briefings. All right. And the next tract is Wahalote Ranch tract. It is a residential development, again located on the northwest side, just off the near the intersection of Scenic Loop Road and Babcock Road. This is an 1,160-acre tract, and the developer is requesting 3,000 water EDUs and 0 wastewater EDUs from SAWS. This tract also falls within the ETJ and within the contributing zone, and a majority of the tract does fall within that 5-mile radius of Camp Bullis. While this tract also falls within our water CCN, it does fall outside of our wastewater CCN in this location. And included in this project, the developer will be required to install a section of 16-inch water main that was included in our impact fee calculation. Therefore, for constructing that, he will receive impact fee credits. And that impact fee eligible main is shown there by the dashed lines in yellow and purple. And as you can see, that will be looping our system in this area, providing us some redundancy for this area and ensuring great service at this area. In addition to that main, the developer will be extending a 16-inch water main into their tract and looping it into our existing infrastructure to the northeast of the tract. Of course, that 16-inch will be serving the majority of the tract. Due to the contours and elevations in this tract, it actually is required to be served by 2 different pressure zones. The northwest corner is a little bit higher area, and it will be served off that blue tank, which is currently under design, and it will be Megan Pump Station. And so that project is currently under design review to be constructed in the future. And once it is constructed, the developer will be extending a 12-inch water main off of that and looping it back into our existing system there on the northwest. All right. And looking at the wastewater infrastructure, again, the developer has requested 0 EDUs from SAWS. Looking at our existing wastewater CCN shown there in green, as well as our existing infrastructure in this area, we are quite a ways, or the development is quite a ways from our existing system and CCN service area. So based on this information, review by staff, as well as input from multiple stakeholders, it is staff recommendation that SAWS not allow this tract to connect to the SAWS wastewater CCN via lift station force main system or gravity system. Now, it is important to note that with our recommendation, that is not a stop-all for sewer service for this development. In fact, we are just limiting the number of options available to the developer to septic as well as their own personal wastewater treatment plant. And so while that is important, and I certainly appreciate everyone's comments today about this tract and their concerns, SAWS also has those concerns, and as part of that, we have gone a step further. We've worked with Sierra Club and GIA, and we greatly appreciate their input and assistance with this. But we have worked with the developer and gained 9 concessions, which they have previously talked about. I want to discuss those 9 concessions that the developer has given us, and this is an opportunity to protect our precious source and the community in this area. So we're glad we're able to do that, and it will be included in the utility service agreement. The first concession is that the developer will be setting aside 50% of this project as open space. There was a comment about that could be part of the yards and the development and the houses. Based on the developer, engineer's input, that will be half of the acreage will be dedicated to open space and not touched, will not be developed at all. The second concession that the developer has given us provided is that they will be restricting the project to 30% impervious cover. Right now, based on the requirements being in the contributing zone, they would only be required for a floodplain buffer. So this is a great input here for the 30% impervious cover. The third one which we've talked about before with you, is that if a development does decide to go with septic systems, we would encourage them. And in this case, we have put a stipulation that they will be using aerobic spray septic systems if they go that route. And that is, of course, to ensure that the homeowner or operator of that septic system, they know when there's an issue with it, and so better protect and make corrections to that septic system to protect the Edwards Aquifer. The fourth concession is that the developer, if they go with a wastewater treatment plant, that they will be meeting the TCEQ minimum requirements, and they'll also go with that and meet the TCEQ requirements for a wastewater treatment plant within 5 miles of the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone. And we even went a step above the regulatory requirement with them, and that's concession 5, is that the developer will be increasing the treatment requirements to include advanced nutrient removal as well as effluent filtration. These are a step above and beyond the requirements, and to help to ensure a clean discharge from the treatment plant. Now then, with that, that is innovative operations, and it takes a special person. So with that, we've also, as an additional concession, we have required that the developer will make sure that the treatment plant, if it goes that way, will be a licensed wastewater operator with the highest class rating, which would be a Class A, which is above and beyond what a typical wastewater treatment plant of this size would require. Right. And another concession is number 7, is that this wastewater discharge permit that they receive for this treatment plant, if they go that route, it will not be increased in capacity in the future. So they have committed to that, and that they will only serve the 1,160 acres within Wahalote Ranch. So this means that they can't become a purveyor for other lots, other developments beside them, add acreage. It is only allowed to treat wastewater produced from this 1,160 acre tract. And another concern that we had also heard is that they would put the plant at the edge of their property and discharge directly onto other people's property. And so concerned with that, if they don't see what discharge is going through there, if their wastewater, if something goes wrong with it, they wouldn't know about it. So with that, we've added stipulation 8, or concession 8, that the treatment plant will discharge at least 1 mile upstream into their property before it discharges their property. They'll have eyes first. They'll be the first ones to affect if there is ever an issue with that treatment plant. And the last concession that we did obtain from the developer is that if they choose to use irrigation services with this effluent, if they are able to do that, then they will be required to add soil supplementation. This is up in the hill country, a lot of rock, so they'll have to add additional soil in this area so that any irrigation will be absorbed by the soil and not just lead to runoff. So these are 9 concessions we're very happy with, that we were able to get these, and we hope that the SAWS community will see the benefit of these as we move forward. Again, our refusal to do service does not stop them from building and moving forward with this treatment. Now, another key item that we have included in the USA, while we are working with them for these concessions, we have made it clear that this does not waive SAWS' right or the City of San Antonio's right to protest the treatment plant permit or their application for CCN for this area, which they will need in order to serve multiple individual lots. So we have not given up that right, and that will be part to include us in the permitting process. And so while we've included these and we've made that statement, it is important that should board approve this USA today, we are not the last approval. This development will not be moving forward as soon as we say yay or nay to this USA. There's still additional approvals that the developer will be required. At the state level, TCEQ will be authorizing and issuing that wastewater treatment plant permit. So they have to go through that entire process with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. In order to obtain a CCN, Certificate of Convenience and Necessity, they will have to go through the Public Utilities Commission, and that is the entire process there. That's at the state level. At the local level, as part of that CCN request, the City of San Antonio will have to consent to the CCN and provide that documentation to the PUC for their consideration. So City of San Antonio still has comments there. In addition, Bexar County and the City of San Antonio will have to review and approve the master development plan for this development. So they'll have to do that, as well as the individual plats as the property develops. And lastly, one of the items that the developer may go for is a financing district over this property in order to pay for these improvements, which we see a lot of that moving forward lately with developments. So in order to establish a MUD, Municipal Utility District, or a PID, Public Infrastructure District, I believe, Improvement District, thank you. The City of San Antonio will actually have to approve that financing district, the creation of it. So with that, we are moving forward and recommending denial of wastewater service to this by SAWS and adding these stipulations, concessions that we've been able to work with the developer. And so with that, SAWS staff recommend approval for water and wastewater for both the Brooks United 16E tract and the Ranchland Development tract. And staff recommend approval for the water EDUs for Wahalote Ranch, but denial of wastewater services for Wahalote. I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
You've heard the staff presentation. I'll entertain a motion before questions by the board. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Thank you, Trustee Pata. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Belmontes.
Madam Chair, can I ask a proper question?
Sure.
Will there be two votes, one for the wastewater application and one for the water service application? Is this a single vote?
It is,
Okay.
it is positioned as a single vote,
Okay.
presented as a single vote. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions, Tracy,
ma'am.
for you, and then I've asked Mr. Nino from the City of San Antonio to be present today. So when staff was considering this water request, did we even consider less EDUs in alignment with the North Sector Plan?
So with this, I defer to Ms. Belinsky, excuse me.
I'm sorry, if I could jump in, Chair Burley. What's important, and so many of the comments that we heard today related to the number of EDUs and the density of the development. When our staff receives a request for a utility service agreement, they're looking at the number of EDUs for the purpose of establishing how much infrastructure needs to get built by the developer to provide the service to that development. And so when they look at the number of EDUs being requested, it is not with an eye to density, it is an eye only with the attempt to identify how much infrastructure would be required to connect to our system.
But is it not a journey or a path to a certain density?
The utility service agreement, is it a path to
The
it?
EDUs.
Yes, it is. It is.
So was there an opportunity for us to approve less?
Not really. So long as the developer is meeting the requirements for the amount of infrastructure to be constructed for that number of EDUs, that is all that our development services is looking for. So there's not a place for them to say, well, we think you should only have 2,000 EDUs or 1,000 EDUs. It is their place to say, if you want 3,000 EDUs, then you need to build this size of an extension to connect to our system.
Is Mr. Nino here? Would you please come forward? Thank you for responding to my request. You sent me a copy of the North Sector Plan. I had an opportunity to review it. Just for our listeners, just explain what the North Sector Plan is and who enforces it and the enforcement limitations.
Yes, ma'am, and good morning to members of the board, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair. The North Sector Plan is a community planning process that occurred in around the 2010s with the idea that the city of San Antonio still had the ability to annex property, which our authority to do so was removed in 2017. And so that we would work collectively with local communities, with our neighbors, with residents in the ETJ to identify those areas where it would be most appropriate to annex or to have a collaborative partnership in order to implement, good quality development and good quality communities in the ETJ. So that really was the intent of the North Sector Plan. Also, because we have property, of course, we have properties that are directly adjacent to the city of San Antonio's borders, we want to ensure that development that occurs within those areas are appropriate and that they are good neighbors to the city of San Antonio. And should the city decide that it would be appropriate to annex, then we could take those actions. We would have some land use guidance in place. But something that I would like to state is the fact that the North Sector Plan is just that. It does state very openly upfront that it's a guide to development. Ultimately, state law does prohibit the city's ability to regulate density within the ETJ. So the plan, though it's a collaborative process where we do try to identify areas where growth may occur and the types of communities we would like to see in the ETJ, we cannot regulate it because of the density restrictions, because of language within the local government code.
So I understand your enforcement ability, but looking at the maps and the areas that you've identified, the tiers that you've
Yes, ma'am.
identified in your plan, this area does fall into, I believe, the country tier or the rural estate tier.
Yes, ma'am.
So
I think that there's a small component that is rural estate, but the majority of it would be country.
in the country tier. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a representative from the developer here?
Hey, Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up question to Mr. Nino
Sure. Trustee?
on your point?
Trustee McGee?
So if all that's true, then why did we create an expectation on the density in the North Sector Plan?
The density that has been laid out within the North Sector Plan really is a guide for how we would like to see growth and development occur within a particular area. It wasn't based necessarily on specific engineering studies or on studies to determine that something would be the most appropriate density and carrying capacity for a particular area. It was a recommendation to be used as a guide collectively between the city of San Antonio and our neighbors, but it was not intended to be an expectation that development would occur at that exact density within a particular area.
Do you think the neighbors of a development like this are relying upon that expectation?
I would hesitate to speak directly for them. I think that they would like to see a development that is similar to what is within the North Sector Plan, and I can understand that. They did participate in that process. But again, I think that what would be most important to restate is the idea that, yes, that type of development would have been ideal, I think, to the local community, but the city of San Antonio and SAWS wouldn't have the ability to actually enforce those density restrictions because of what's been outlined in state law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Trey Dawson with Pape Dawson Engineers here on behalf of Lennar Homes, the developer, and happy to answer any questions that anybody would have.
Thank you for coming today, and thank you for working with staff on the conditions that staff has shared with us thus far. So there are a lot of references to the North Sector Plan and compatible development, compatible density to what others are enjoying in terms of the natural resources that area provides. Is there any consideration by the developer to consider the guidance and the recommendations that are present in the tiers relative to this area?
So as a standard kind of production type builder project like this, we usually see about 5 to 6 units per acre, which for this property, which is over 1,100 acres, would be 5,000 or 6,000 houses. And of course, because we're in the ETJ and there's no land use restrictions, we would be within our right to do that. However, we have agreed, as Tracy presented earlier, to back off of that by setting aside 50% of the project as open space. There was a comment made during the public comment period that implied that would include, possibly tennis courts or swimming pools. But I just wanted to make clear that this open space is 100% in its natural position, in its natural state, and would be left untouched. So that's more than 500 acres. So that's really the developer's attempt in limiting the project to about half of what they normally would do for a project this size.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yes. Trustee Hartberger?
I'll talk a little bit more about this during the other sort of more open discussion period, but at least one of the comments that was brought up by a couple of people had to do with traffic and road expansion and who would pay for what. I guess I don't need you to go into this because that's not our vote. My sole question is, has your client or your company made had any meetings with city of, Gray Forest, I don't want to say it wrong, or any of these other sort of neighborhood associations to answer? It just sounds like there's a lot of open questions that frankly are not SAWS questions. I'm just curious what other communications has been made.
We're absolutely open to that. We really viewed this as the first step in a very long journey. And just to address the questions about drainage and traffic, we will have to go through the City of San Antonio and Bexar County permitting process. There are traffic ordinances and drainage ordinances that are in place, very detailed studies, floodplain studies, traffic impact analysis studies that require us to review our impact that the project would have on the surrounding development. And those rules and regulations are in place through the City of San Antonio's Unified Development Code. So that would really be the next step in our process, is to begin those discussions with the city, with the county, and then also, where appropriate, with the neighborhood groups and individuals and organizations that are stakeholders in the process.
Trustee Potter?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I have some questions to Mr. Dawson and some questions for Tracy. But Mr. Dawson, you and I have spoken before, because I have also had concerns about high density development in this area. And you have addressed the tree canopy by the 50% open space. Now, another concern that one of the speakers had was the conserving the steep slopes of the hill country. Could you please address what plans are for that?
Yes, so the developer plans to comply with the 2009 steep slope ordinance for the City of San Antonio, and then also the 2010 tree ordinance. So as part of the entitlement process, we have to go through with development services in Bexar County. We get what's called a master development plan that outlines the subdivision layout of the property. And as part of that, we will prepare a tree preservation plan, which will be, of course, reviewed by development services staff at the City of San Antonio. But we do intend to comply with the City of San Antonio latest tree ordinance. To our knowledge, there's no grandfathering available for this project that would allow us to go back to a previous tree ordinance. And the 2010 tree ordinance is the latest ordinance approved by the city. So we would be subject to, the latest guidelines that are currently enforceable by the city.
Thank you. Tracy, so you mentioned, just to say this aloud again, because this was one of the concerns, if we were not to act and if we were to just retire the CCN, will that stop development or?
Certainly not. Then they would also be looking at their own water source and drilling, most likely drilling new wells in this area, producing their own system for water.
Okay, and could you talk a little bit more about an A license operator? Because for the people just that don't know what the classes and what this means.
Certainly. There's, I believe, A, B, and C, if I remember correctly, is the lowest class. But this is the A license. It requires a bachelor's degree at a minimum, years of experience operating a treatment plant. It's higher ability and knowledge in order to ensure this is treated, the plant operates correctly, maintains consistently. They do have to be available 5 days a week at the plant, and I believe 24/7 on call as the lead operator of this plant. So there is, it will be their bread and butter. They will own and maintain and operate this lift station and treatment plant and be responsible for the results of the effluent and reporting to TCEQ.
Very good. And I just wanted to comment on, Chairwoman, that I think, all of the neighbors and the community that have come to speak, because this is a sensitive area. I consider myself one of the neighbors because I live 7 minutes from there. I have visited multiple times with staff to understand what our options are, and as a water board, we're basically deciding whether to approve or to leave. And if we approve, and if we approve with conditions that we have already pre-negotiated with the developer, then we're choosing to have a seat on the table. Some of the original concerns that we heard in previous meetings from all of the community were the concerns about putting sewer lines over all of these area, even more to put lift stations over the Edwards Aquifer. And we were very emphatic that we were not going to approve those. So we moved to the next options, and the next options were the wastewater treatment plant, and there are different types of wastewater treatment plants, and you raise the bar on this one very high. You're requiring advanced nutrient removal, effluent filtration, and then one of the speakers talk about policing. How are we going to police these? And the way to police these is requiring this A license operator. That's not easy task to do or find. With this, I found that this seems to me like the best option that we have as a water board. We're not approving the wastewater CCN, okay? So we're denying that. We're approving the water CCN with a bunch of caveats that were ready. So with this, we're meeting, the tree canopy, we're meeting the steep slopes. We're not endangering the aquifer with the sewer lines or lift stations in there, and we're putting a very, very stringent requirements on wastewater treatment plant and in septics if that were to happen, okay? So with that, I feel that this is the best decision to go. They still have to go through the city of San Antonio. They still have to go through TCEQ.
Yes.
So as what it pertains to this water board, I feel that this is the seat that we need to have at the table to make decisions, and that's why I move approval of the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Potter. Trustee McGee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. First of all, I believe that all of the folks who have opposed this development from the community have made a very compelling case, and I really appreciate hearing from them. And I really do hope that the developer will go even further during this process to reach out to the neighborhood and provide even more concessions to be a good neighbor. And I hope that Commissioners Court and City Council will also listen to their position and also support their position. But unfortunately, I don't think all of that overcomes SAWS' obligation to provide water, and so I would support it.
Thank you, Trustee McGee. Trustee Hardberger.
So I also did want to give a response, and I won't promise that I'm going to be brief, unlike Mr. McGee, because this is obviously something that I've felt pretty passionately about for a while. You know, this is another example of my ongoing frustration that SAWS is positioned as the gatekeeper for land development and land use, which we actually don't have authority to be. And so, you know, how I feel personally about 3,000 homes going into this delicate area is not really what I'm here to vote on. First, I guess I have a question for, I don't know if it would be Nancy or Robert. This is within our USA, so there were some statements about, you know, it's an easy vote. We have done there have been a lot of internal conversations, both with the outside community and amongst ourselves. And so I just want to review, since the water is within our current CCN, what does that mean for us in terms of our alternatives for, you know, kind of the just vote no argument?
Well, this board obviously can vote no. If it chooses to vote no, then the developer has the options to do what they feel is necessary, and that is to petition PUC, Public Utilities Commission, for decertification. But along with that, I would imagine there's other causes of actions that they may have regarding this matter.
So as within our CCN, we do have some obligations. And I know that we have had conversations, the beginning of conversations about potentially adjusting our CCN in certain areas. I took some time and looked at a map and looked at you know, different areas where we've had this conversation. I'm not seeing a lot of legal support if somebody were to bring a claim. If we tried to pull back the CCN, I think that would be a somewhat difficult argument for us to successfully make. One thing I just wanted to note is I sort of started writing down the various concerns, all of which I agree with, for the record. They included density, amount of impervious cover, potential flooding, impact to roads, schools, quality of life. I just want to note, these are all land use issues that are incredibly appropriate and part of what the conversation should be in another building. So, you know, we've talked extensively about the city being the decider for this. I've gotten feedback from city council members about this. I would encourage all of the participants who are here to go to those meetings where land use discussions and density decisions are appropriate and being made. This is not the last project of this kind that we will see in this area, I am sure. So how we move forward on this is important. I will say personally, I bristle at the thought that we are making a decision solely based on profits. That is 100% untrue. And I want to give a lot more credit to the staff in this and the work that they have put into both on the wastewater side initially and to get these additional agreements. So I think it is undermining staff and not giving them credit to make statements like that. So I had one more thing to say. It's gone. Who knows what it is? Oh, I did have one question. Have there been conversations with the military Camp Bullis area? And if so, have they weighed in at all?
Yes, we do send out information as part of our communications with the military base as well as the city of San Antonio, those ongoing bi-monthly meetings. And so one of the items, we did send this out, as well as Ranch Land View, and based on JBSA's comments, they had no comments.
Okay. So I guess I'll just close with saying that to me, because of the limits of what our authority and agency is, what's important to me with the SAWS board hat on is to maintain a seat at the table, which I appreciate the staff has done to the best of its abilities. And I can assure the audience that we will continue to sort of pay attention to this, because we do have a responsibility to protect the Edwards water and other community members.
Thank you. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation too. And I will make my best attempts to be brief, but there's a ton of context around this, and this is not an easy case. First thing I'd like to say in defense of Rudy Nino and the city staff, the North Sector Plan was created at a time when the cities of this state actually had annexing authority. We still do, but it's really on paper only. It's virtually impossible for the city to extend its land use authority into the ETJ and other parts of the county based on the new rules around annexation. That being said, I do believe in the North Sector Plan, and I think the chair asked an appropriate question, which is what is the developer going to do to adhere to the principles in the North Sector Plan? You know, one of the most difficult things that we have to do here at the city is to manage and govern through change. Change is going to happen. Our neighborhoods are going to be different. The city's going to grow, et cetera, et cetera. Quality of life is going to hopefully be improved everywhere. We want that to happen. One thing that cannot change, though, is the protection of our water system and the protection of our water supply, primarily the Edwards Aquifer. And that's why I think we have continued to extend the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program. And we go through these conversations on a frequent basis to determine the individual decisions that we're making. Does it advance or detract from the protection of our water supply? That being said, I appreciate the work of the staff and the representatives of the developer. On this note, this is on the contributing zone, which is a sensitive area of the contributing zone. So our number one issue, our number one concern from the start of this has been wastewater, effluent. What's going to happen with the sewer function of this development? Which is why I also was asking, are we going to do the water versus because they originally came to us asking for wastewater service as well. Is that right? Or is that not true?
Well, initially, actually, they've always requested zero wastewater.
Zero wastewater? Okay.
Yes,
Okay, well, that's good.
Yes.
Because, you know, I think what's been clear in these discussions with, you know, the scientists and the environmental advocates is that how we handle the wastewater penetrating potentially through an Edwards Aquifer protection easement versus lift stations, et cetera, the best of the worst options is potentially treatment on site. We control it. My question about that is, if there is a problem, whose responsibility is it? Is the developer bonded? Who's paying for the cleanup? And are we going to be given the right to inspect at will that site if we wanted to?
Once the package plant is built, it's a TCEQ permitted facility, and they have to go through state rules and state laws. So that inspection, that oversight is the state's.
Okay, well, I mean, would SAWS be able to send our own engineers out there if we wanted to inspect the site, just to make sure that it's living up to our expectations?
Not to my knowledge, we wouldn't have that authority unless TCQ asked us to do that.
Or if the developer would agree to that. And I think the TCEQ has the ultimate responsibility for that enforcement. If we become aware of some noncompliance, we would alert the TCEQ to undertake their responsibilities for enforcement. At the front end of all of this, in the permitting process, SAWS does have the opportunity to review and participate in the permitting process. And so at the front end, that's where they'll have the initial opportunity to do that type of engineering review that you've described. So that already would exist.
Yeah. And you see what I'm getting at. I mean, there's a lot. So the developer has made some concessions, important concessions in my mind. we want to make sure that those concessions stick and that they're adhered to. That's my question. And to the extent that we can, we're still working through the TCEQ.
And one attempt that we did was one of the conditions, which is to the discharge be 1 mile within their property. Most of the problems that occur at a treatment plant, you can see them readily available on the plant or immediately right at the discharge point. So they'll have to, that discharge will have to travel 1 mile on their property, on the development property, so that they will know, the citizens will know that live around there of a potential problem, therefore report it and hopefully fix it right away.
Okay. This is a question, I guess, for Nancy. The CCN obviously is instructive to us. We have to provide services if it's requested, and so we're working to negotiate some concessions because they take care of other issues that we may be having. Does it prevent us from pulling back the CCN if this development moves forward and we agree to service in the future?
It doesn't prevent you from approaching the PUC to ask for a change of your CCN, if that's what you're asking.
And the service could continue and the CCN could still be rolled back at some later date?
Yes, it gets harder for the reasons that Trustee Hartberger already articulated. It gets harder to move those boundaries after
Okay.
and your infrastructure is already in place and perhaps oversized in anticipation of the growth for our service area.
Okay. I'm almost finished here. So this is part of the military lighting overlay district, so they're adhering to the military lighting requirements. This is in the ETJ where we do have tree canopy protections. I would ask that the tree canopy portion of the development is also codified in the USA because there have been overtures by the legislature to undo our ability to regulate tree canopy in the ETJ, and we want that to stick as well with this development going forward. And then it's been asked a couple times about the open space. To me, if our pursuit is in adherence as closely as possible to the North Sector Plan, which I agree with, is in reducing density to the best ability that we can, given the fact that we have very little enforcement authority. This agreement to preserve half of the property is significant. If we don't have something to negotiate with, leverage, in this case the USA, to do that, that agreement's off the table. In which case, if they're having a production home builder go out there and they're trying to reach economies of scale to do their own water service, et cetera, we're very likely looking at 5,000 to 6,000 homes. So to me, the most significant part of this agreement is that preservation of green space, which I want to retain. So to wrap up my comments, I think that for a lot of reasons, of all of the not attractive options that we have, in working with the developer to achieve some of these concessions, it's been good work. But there's also a whole other set of conversations that are going to occur at the city when it comes to the authority that we do have at the city to deal with density. And I would ask the developer, and I had a conversation with Lennar Homes that said, we appreciate this concessions, but look, we don't need density there. We need home building everywhere in the city, not where density is a challenge. So what I'm suggesting is that in advance of those conversations, I would just urge the developer and the representative to consider what's being talked about up here in terms of density and work with us because those conversations are going to come up again at the city council. So again, thank you very much. I'll be supporting the item today, but very challenging given all of the myriad layers of authority that we have and we don't have, and I appreciate the work that's been done so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tracy, I have one last question. We've talked about the operator for the plant, for the treatment plant, but we've not talked about the term of time. So is that for perpetuity? I mean, they could establish this operator for the initial operations of the plant, but no one's talked about how long that person has to, or that qualification has to be in place.
So it was intended to be permanently, that
Okay.
the Class A operator would be required permanently.
Okay. Are there any further questions for staff? Okay.
I would just wanted to make a comment as well. I learned a lot from the last few board meetings I've attended. Amazing that the work that went into it was both professional but also passionate. You know, you thought things out very well. The 9 concessions, also very well thought out. And my question is, and I'm, new to the board, is this typical? I mean, it sounds to me like you went above and beyond and that you were trying to find the right path for, SAWS and for the developer and for the community. And how often does this happen? And will they, I guess, a little bit piggybacking on what the mayor said and Chairwoman said, are they adhere to this forever, for perpetuity?
So we don't usually go this much detail because this is a unique situation. It's over the recharge and working with a potential treatment plant, package treatment plant, where we always try to typically avoid those and include them in our system, our gravity solution system. So yes, this is a rare for us to do this, and but of course the diligence that we put forth on every USA continues. It's not just this one, but yes, there was an additional step here. Now then, as far as what was the last part? Sorry.
We're saying we have a seat at the table.
Yes.
And does this oversight of these concessions, that they adhere to them, is that where that will happen? Is that what someone would be participating in?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll have a lot of input with the permitting process, and we've actually included in there that they put those, like the wastewater Class A, as part of the license requirement, so that it's perpetual. It continues, and it will stay with their license. It's not just SAWS only making that requirement.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Yes.
I feel like I learned a lot, and watching you guys work at this, thoughtful and very passionate and very professional. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
So I have a point of clarification. I heard the mayor mention the tree canopy ordinance. Are you seeking an additional condition to the conditions that were outlined by Tracy earlier?
Yeah, I would just ask that when the USA is consummated, that we include language that requires adherence to the 2010 tree ordinance in the language of the USA.
Yes, Mayor, we hear that.
Mr.
I see they're
Dawson.
shaking their heads. It hasn't been negotiated, but they're shaking their heads, yes, so.
Doesn't it already
Sure that-
apply to the ETJ under the Petranco case?
Yeah,
yes.
it's
That's
in,
law.
we have the authority as given to us by the legislature, which has seemed prone to take it away.
Right,
So,
Yeah, so far we have it under the case already.
but you know the state.
Well, right, but
Okay.
just talking about today, not tomorrow.
Hearing no further questions, I would ask all of the trustees to vote. And Trustee McGee will need your verbal vote.
Aye.
Thank you. It passes. Item
Thank you
18
very much.
passes. Thank you, staff, for the work you did on this.